Welcome to the Chorus One podcast. In this podcast, we explore the emerging open financial system facilitated by scalable, interoperable blockchain networks. Tune in every Monday to dive deep into cutting-edge projects and protocols with Chorus One team members and guests.
Hi, this is Brendan here from Chorus One. Today I'm here with Matt Luongo from Keep Network and Thesis, and we want to talk about their new launch. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, really exciting news in the last couple of weeks. Keep have just announced tBTC, which we'll go into in some detail, but it's certainly got the whole of crypto talking. And what's interesting is it's got everybody talking, right? It's not just the Ethereum community or the Bitcoin community. It's got I've seen people in EOS talking about it. I've seen people in Solana talking about it. Everybody's starting to think, okay, this is really exciting. So we'll get into the details of exactly what it is in a second. But before we do, just a little bit about Chorus. So Chorus One, we run validator infrastructure for crypto networks. Currently, we run networks for Cosmos, Loom, Terra. We've got test nets with Region and a couple of other networks. Our whole thesis all the way along has been around the intersection of interoperability, DeFi and staking, right? That's everything we do is in those areas. Like with Cosmos and Loom, we've already got this thing where we're bridging networks, either with inter-blockchain communication or other bespoke integration projects. You know, Solana are building a high-performance DEX on their platform. Terra is a stable coin, so we're very much in the DeFi space already. But we've been also kind of putting our own ideas together around what the implications are that we can take staking as DeFi, right? Can we take staked assets and turn them into financial services? So we were very interested to see what Matt and his team have been working on, because it fits very much into kind of our thesis of how this all plays out. So Matt, do you want to kick off and just give me a little bit of the backstory about Keep and Thesis and how it all came about?
Sure, yeah. So the basic idea behind Keep, and this was, our team originally started a Bitcoin 1.0 company back in the day called Fold. Some of you guys might, if you're into payments, might still know about it. But we actually pivoted, and that team has spun off and started working on Keep from some problems we found. And the basic idea was that we needed access. I won't even go into what we were working on, but we needed the ability to keep private variables on the EVM. So as we were programming, we needed to be able to have private assets that were custodied and could kind of be passed around. So we dug into this and we realized that for our particular use case, what we actually needed was this kind of, we call it autonomous privacy, right? It's best served by a type of cryptography called multi-party computation. I can go real deep into that, and I think it's a huge rabbit hole. I'd love to talk in person if anyone ever finds me on the street and is a crypto nerd. But what that means for this project, we built this platform initially for other folks. But what we found was it was actually a perfect use for DeFi. So we had this opportunity to take the privacy-preserving technology that we built and to apply it to interop and eventually, as we'll talk about, to decentralized finance. So this project we're calling tBTC. And the basic idea is that through the Keep network, we can actually spin up new wallets, new public-private key pairs for anything really. But initially, it's ECDSA, and that lets us store Bitcoin in a way that's sort of, it's not non-custodial, but it's like a trust-minimized custodial way. So yeah, that's kind of how we got into it. But before I go too much further, I also want to say we're not the only ones working on tBTC. So James Presswich and the Suma team have been really helpful. James has deep experience on kind of the Bitcoin script side, as well as just being he's a brilliant guy. So actually, in addition to Keep working on it, Suma is working on this, and we've started a group called the Cross-Chain Group. So if anyone else wants to kind of come in and help us build this thing out. So tBTC, it's a Bitcoin to Ethereum bridge. It's a bridge in a deep way. So it's not a synthetic, it's actually an interop play. You can receive Bitcoin on Ethereum and then have a fungible token minted. And then anyone can buy or sell that token on a DEX or what have you, and then actually redeem to Bitcoin. So a really cool property of this is you could actually get into Bitcoin from Ethereum. Someone could buy on DEX and then actually end up setting a Bitcoin wallet and then redeem. It also gives us a bunch of fun things, like you can build mixers on Ethereum. If you guys are keeping track of ETH 1108 or some of these other privacy improvements, I think there's a really strong opportunity there. But what's the obvious one, right? I'm going on about this tech, but the obvious case for Bitcoin is collateral for DeFi. And I think that's what I'm most excited about.
Okay. So tell me about that use case, because that seems like the obvious one. So there's billions of dollars locked up in Bitcoin. Yeah. It's got very little to do apart from, you got your HODL strategy and maybe your trading strategies.
Well,
now you can access anything on Ethereum DeFi.
Well, let me tell you, my wife does not love having this much of our net worth in crypto, and she pushes back. And so one of the compromises is she said, we're going to buy a house. I said, okay, I don't want to pay for a house, so I guess I'll get a mortgage and I'll get leverage so I can keep my crypto. But then she's like, well, we need a down payment. I'm like, are you saying I have to sell? Like, no, I don't, but in an ideal world, what we need to do in this situation. So as someone, I've worked with lenders and they won't give you a mortgage against your crypto. They will make you sell and take the tax hit. And so what this would allow you to do is it would allow you to take Bitcoin and lock it up in a CDP on Maker, for example, and then take stable coins out against it, which I think a bunch of us are looking for. We're still long whatever our chosen assets are, but we're looking for access to equity, right? We're looking for access to buy a house, settle down, move on with our lives while still remaining super long crypto. So I think that's what I'm excited about as someone who's maybe a little financially irresponsible with my exposure. But I think, other folks in the space, there's an opportunity to kind of like get leverage on the Ethereum chain using something like Compound combined with something like Maker, and actually take Bitcoin as this asset that's just sort of sitting there and start earning Bitcoin on your Bitcoin. So that's been a theme lately. I think BlockFi just raised some ridiculous round, but I feel like a lot of people have forgotten what it feels like to have an exchange just disappear and lose a big piece of your life savings. I'm sure the BlockFi team is great, and I'm sure they're doing everything well, but ideally, you would not be trusting a single custodian.
Sure. Yeah, so maybe walk me through that. So there's like things like Blockstream and WBTC, things like that. I mean, how do you compare to those?
There's a couple ways to cut this, right? So we're building a fully redeemable ERC20 on Ethereum that's Bitcoin backed. So to me, fully redeemable means there's no KYC, there's no ability for a custodian to sort of block your redemption or censor it, or at least, in the long run. Obviously, people can always kind of try to censor things and attack miners, but that's complicated. So if you compare us to WBTC, it's really straightforward, which is WBTC uses centralized custodians. They have this idea of a merchant. The merchant has to KYC their users. And you get into this situation where if some sanctioned coins or something got involved with this system, suddenly you would find that there's a whole bunch of Bitcoin that just can't be moved and WBTC that can't be redeemed. So I think actually seeing that project was part of what got this team working on tBTC, because we knew, well, this can be done in an almost trustless way, like in an economically, I will say that, an economically trustless way. And then you compare us to something like Liquid. So I think for those of us who have been excited about sidechains for a long time, especially Bitcoin sidechains, Liquid was a bit of a disappointment. Originally it came out and we sort of said, well, that's not a real two-way peg. And there's lots of true Scotsman stuff going on in this part of the space. But, we didn't feel that great about it. But I think the limitations that are worth understanding, it's a fixed validator set. So it's 15 known entities. So I've talked to Bitcoiners about this and they've said, well, that's great. They're reputable. And, I've said, well, that's still 15 people. At the end of the day, 15 people that will need to be undermined to kind of undermine an entire economy, which is far too few in my opinion, right?
Sure.
So I think the two differences between us and Liquid are, one, we were comfortable going on to an existing chain with an existing token. I understand if you're like a hardcore Bitcoiner why you don't want to do that, but you sacrifice some really nice security benefits if you go to a chain with an already existing large miner set, right? And then the other big difference is that instead of a fixed signer set, each of our deposits has as much distributed security as Liquid's peg. And so, people will disagree. Oh, well, these super great custodians are participating. But what you have with this system, and you don't have in Liquid is, or really in WBTC either, is if any of those signers cheat, all you have is the legal system. So you can say, well, a lot of them are in the US and I trust the US courts. Okay, some people aren't in the US and it's very expensive to go through the US courts from their jurisdiction. In our case, instead, we say, you don't know who these people are, but you know that this is a civil-resistant signer set, and you know that they've put down a bond that will more than cover any damage they can do to you. And then if they steal your funds or if they censor them, we take their funds and we give them to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just walk me through that. So we're trying to break it down from like deposits and bonding and the different steps. So Maybe just start with deposits, and I guess the flip side of that is the redemption, right?
Yeah.
So just walk through kind of maybe
Sure.
how do I put money in to start with, and then how could I take it back out, and then we'll
definitely.
figure out what goes in.
Yeah, so the deposit is pretty straightforward, and then we're working on the user experience getting a little bit stronger, but you start out, we presume that you have MetaMask and Bitcoin, which is not everyone has both. But you tell Ethereum you would like to make a deposit. Right now we're using a fixed lot size of 1 BTC, so it's a pretty significant financial decision for some of us to do that. Other people don't care. But you say, I want to make a deposit, and then what happens is that hits the Ethereum chain. Then you wait for all these off-chain participants who are chosen by a random beacon to come together, and they put up a bond that is 1.5x what you say you're going to deposit. And then what they come together and they do is called distributed key generation. We're using Rosario Gennaro's most recent threshold ECDSA construction. But anyone hearing that can just assume it means slightly fancier multisig. So we're using slightly fancier multisig. These guys come together and they give you a public key hash, so a Bitcoin address.
Sure.
That's all returned through the Ethereum chain. Once you've got that, you then go to the Bitcoin chain and you deposit your Bitcoin. You wait for however much work is required. It kind of changes a little bit over time. And then you take that proof and you submit it back to Ethereum. So the same SPV proof that allows us to have light wallets will also allow us to actually prove to Ethereum that this deposit's been made.
Okay. Why would I do this, and what does it cost me, or do I gain from this? Or?
Yeah, so right now it's around 50 basis points for a 6-month deposit. Actually, as a depositor, all you have to do is set that money aside, and we'll talk about redemptions in a minute, but there's a very good chance you will get that money and then some back. But that's the basic idea for deposits. And then, once you've proven this deposit, you get a fungible token on the Ethereum side that you can start kind of moving around and doing whatever you want with.
Okay, great. So maybe just talk then a little bit about the redemptions.
Sure.
Do you think that makes it clearer? Like we say, how do you get money in? That's how I get money in, and I want to take it back out. I guess it's just the process of
course, yeah. So you have all of these deposits now from various people. Each one is mapped to a Bitcoin UTXO. Each one is mapped to a signer set that has the combined together. They have the private key for that address. And so now you say, okay, I've got 1 tBTC and I want to get back to 1 BTC. So you choose any of those deposits. It would make sense to choose an old one or really just any of them. And you say, look, here's my tBTC. I'd like my Bitcoin back, and here's a Bitcoin address. And so now what we do, what the smart contracts do, is it says, okay, we're requesting that you sign this Bitcoin transaction off-chain, folks. There is a time limit, and if you do not sign the transaction and prove that you've signed it within that time limit, your funds will be forfeit. That's one piece, right? But then the next piece is like, what if Bitcoin's having a fee event? What if we've got another run up and suddenly everything costs $30? So we also have a little fee adjustment algorithm so that you can keep resubmitting and building up without slashing anyone. And then after that, in an ideal world, what does it take? It takes a couple confirmations on the Bitcoin side, and then you've got your money. Now, how do fees work? Earlier I said depositors put down 50 basis points for a 6-month deposit. Redeemers actually pay that. And the idea is we wanted to make the UX such that depositors were incentivized at least to help bootstrap this thing. So as a redeemer, you pay back that 50 basis points, and then I think we're talking about maybe another 10 to the depositor, just sort of as like a thank you, and that's it.
Okay. And what was the logic with that? Does that keep money in the system then? Because it discourages people taking out? And then how do people price that asset then if you know that this kind of...
so
it's like dimmerage, right?
Yeah, so it's a couple things. So one, and some people in the space disagree with me about this logic, so we're going to see. So one, I think that these assets should be priced differently from Bitcoin. So I talked to a great fellow last night that I respect a lot in the Bitcoin space. I'm not sure he'd want to be named, but his point was like, look, in the same way that if I withdraw Bitcoin from exchange, I can withdraw via Lightning or L1, or maybe, I withdraw via Liquid. Maybe you also can withdraw via tBTC. Maybe you should really rename it so I can say, well, I'm withdrawing via this network. And my point was, I would rather the market directly price the risk so I can see how well are we doing, right? But this is an effort not to keep people from moving money back, but it's an effort to kind of make people who are initially testing out the system feel a little bit better, because the idea of spending even 50 basis points of my Bitcoin on a new system is kind of anxiety inducing. That's a little unreasonable. It's not that much, And so we just wanted to move that. And the other thing that's nice is it keeps the depositors' skin in the game a little bit longer, which for a variety of reasons is positive for the system.
Yes. Okay. Great. So talk about bonding. So there's the nodes in the network that are responsible for signing these transactions. They need to put up a bond, right? So there's some collateral there. Can you talk to me about how that works?
Yeah. So initially, new system, there's no Bitcoin. someone wants to deposit Bitcoin, and if you were to just give random strangers your Bitcoin, maybe they'd be nice, but it's hard to imagine that they would not take it, right? And so what we do is we require a bond, but the bond, what is it in? It can't be in Bitcoin. There's not already a Bitcoin that we're comfortable with on the Ethereum chain. So what we do is we say, okay, we want 1.5x that deposit in Ethereum. Of course, the problem is this introduces FX risk, right? So now we have the price of Ether and the price of Bitcoin changing. Mm-hmm. So we have two places where we need to know the price of Bitcoin versus Ethereum. So one is this deposit. And there are a lot of different ways to solve this problem. And I imagine we're going to talk quite a bit about it. So the deposit is one. It's not that bad. The one that's a little bit trickier is this is a 6-month deposit. So in 6 months, how much ETH, if you and I were to make a bet right now, how much ETH would you have to lock up to be 100% certain that your Bitcoin didn't grow past it? I've asked audiences this, and no one is comfortable answering, sure, right? I mean, I'm like, maybe 6x, 7x. It's a lot. And so in this case, you have to be prepared for either Bitcoin or Ethereum to spike relative to one another. And so what we do is we have a liquidation process. And so if ETH slides and it hits 130%, you can look at the GitHub to get the real numbers, but let's say it's 130%. We do what's called a courtesy call, and we basically telling signers, this is going to be closed. It's almost certainly going to suffer slippage. So you're going to lose money. This is your opportunity. So in something like Maker, this is your opportunity to up your account, right? But if you're asking 10, 15, 20 signers to coordinate to pay for something, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to do that in a short amount of time. So what we instead do is any of those signers can now redeem their own deposit. So they can take 1 tBTC from the market, close out their deposit, and get their bond back without slippage. If they don't, or if the price continues to tank fast enough, we then go a step further and we say, okay, all of this is going to Uniswap. All of your bond is going to Uniswap, and we're going to buy tBTC instead. And so the trick there is, as long as you can buy 1 tBTC, you keep a supply peg, and then at that point, the signers can walk with that Bitcoin. It really doesn't matter. The depositor's been made whole, the total market cap is still fully backed, and you have this opportunity actually to take a little profit and burn a little extra tBTC as well.
Sure. I guess this is kind of a little bit off topic, but
sure,
there's one thing that was in my mind. How would the signers coordinate, given that this is permissionless?
Yeah, so it's permissionless, but it's still a public chain, right? So we're not to the, so we've built in some forward compatibility components so we can allow blind staking one day, but doing all of this without being on a completely open and public chain is just a whole nother level of complexity. I mean, here would be a really fun way to do it, right? Just one shared paste bin per deposit, where everyone's prove that you own the key that is staking this, dump it all here, and then we can come back together and we can now move this Bitcoin. So you always have to be prepared for them to collude, even if it's difficult.
Okay, cool. So we've talked through bonding and the kind of collateral and some of the liquidation process. I think what you're alluding to there was around the price oracle, right? Yeah. So let's get into that, because that for me is one of the great stories of this week, right?
Yeah, sure.
Watching on Twitter. It actually made me jump on a plane today. I don't know if you knew this. I was actually due to fly in tomorrow.
Oh, no, I didn't.
And then I heard you were leaving today, so I changed my flight to fly in to meet you. But the reason I wanted to meet you is because of a tweet I saw yesterday where you were just saying, let's all get at a whiteboard, everyone at the Web3 conference, and let's hammer this out. Let's figure out how we're going to solve this price oracle.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so price oracles are sort of this woe of the DeFi space, right? Where we say DeFi for decentralized, and then we're sort of stuck with not very decentralized solutions. So what I did was, originally it was going to be at Web3, but then we realized some people who wanted to come actually weren't at the conference. So we borrowed a Web3 whiteboard and took it out to a restaurant nearby and just sort of in this courtyard started whiteboarding. It was nice because it was not just folks that I'd reached out to, but kind of passerby who were interested walked up and got involved. And so we went over kind of what do price oracles look like that we've seen so far? So what we've seen so far is we've seen trusted price oracles. So either a single party or maybe something like Maker's medianizer, where at least there are multiple parties that are average, so you get the median price. Or we've also seen just sort of other data feed schemes that are a little interesting. The second we've seen is really cool. It's called a shelling game, where basically you get everyone to say what they think the price is. And then if anyone is too far outside the mode of that price, they get slashed. And if anyone's inside the mode, they get rewarded. So this is fantastic because you're just saying it's very difficult for this many people to coordinate very quickly, and anyone can defect and cost everyone else money. So I love shelling games. If you guys remember, the original Augur was very focused on this idea. The problem is If we have ambitions of maybe 5 or 10% of Bitcoin's market cap moving to other chains, that means that shelling game needs to be big enough to cover that, right? So it's really difficult to get the financial guarantees you want.
Yeah.
So the last one is market-based. If you need a USD price, clearly, unless you have USD on chain, you need some sort of trusted oracle to kind of drop it in. But for us, we're dealing with all on-chain assets. So there's an opportunity, instead of asking for a price oracle, instead to just say, no, someone put your money where your mouth is. And if someone else takes the order, then you know, well, there was a price event that we can trust this many Bitcoin or Ethereum with.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the base idea.
So is that decided now? That's going to happen?
Well,
that's your solution for now, or you think you're going to rev on that?
So here's where I think we are. I think we have a pretty solid hybrid approach where we're going to use this market-based approach. And then there are a couple spots where it makes the UX like something will suddenly just take a day. And I think that's when we're going to fall back to kind of the maker style, less trusted, but still trusted oracle. What's nice about this system, and I probably should have said this earlier, is in Maker, if the oracle stops working, everything will go to shit. It's going to be really rough, right? But in this system, the failure case is not too bad. The failure case is we can't accept new deposits. But other than that, like, folks have an opportunity to just sort of take their money out before there's much of a price movement, and everyone just kind of walks home happy. So that's the benefit of this not being a pure synthetic.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. It's pretty dangerous. One of my favorite projects on Ethereum is synthetic. So they had a big event with price feeds where things got very hairy for like 24 hours.
That's
but
right.
Luckily, it was all resolved. So
that's also the benefit of us working with large market cap coins, right? So if I'm just trying to do this with, some Bitcoin Gold or something, this would be incredibly difficult, both from just like the SPV perspective, where people could constantly be lying and rearguing the chain, and then also just the fact that it's very easy to manipulate the price of a smaller cap coin. So,
okay, that's great. Let's dive a bit into the signing stuff, because I mean, I guess that seems to be the magic here, right?
Yeah.
The magic here is to be able to, in a distributed way, a group of people who don't know each other can create a private key that no one of them owns or but they can still own assets through that private key. That sounds like magic, right? So tell me how that works.
So it is kind of magic. I'm still blown away by some of the things that we can do in cryptography today. And I think coming from Bitcoin land, so let's say you're Bitcoin core dev, whatever that label means, but if you're deep on that, you use a very fixed set of cryptographic primitives that you trust, and that's great. Like, it's an incredibly conservative choice, right? And so you look at like ECDSA, versus Schnorr. Schnorr is also really safe, but it was patent encumbered for a long time. But you look at the choices they made, and they're kind of interesting. And then they don't rely on, like, people love to call it, like, snarks is a great example. Moon math. Like, there's a lot of new assumptions for snarks to be secure relative to what we're comfortable with in Bitcoin. So what we're doing here is something called a threshold signature. And it sounds impossible, but the way that we usually do it in cryptocurrency is via multisig. And so multisig, which, by the way, when we say multisig in cryptocurrency, that is actually not what multisig means in cryptography. So that was terrible, whoever made that decision. But multisig in cryptocurrency means multiple single signers have made separate signatures, and then the chain has some validation rule that is actually going to say, okay, 3 of 5 has signed and we're good. So it involves some sort of low-level script or something. But threshold signing actually does this at the cryptographic level. So you can still get M of N, but you only get what looks like a single sig output, which is brilliant. So that's great for chain space. It's private, so you don't necessarily know which M have made that signature. So you'll hear people in Bitcoin are just now getting excited about this for 2 reasons. So one, Schnorr does this very easily. The Music paper from Schnorr, using Schnorr recently is great. But then we're also starting to see folks have finally figured out how to do this with ECDSA. So what they've done is they've taken this multi-party computation approach. They've broken this old school signature scheme down, and now they've got it so that many of us in a room can do something. It looks kind of like Shamir's secret sharing, but to actually create a new key together and then to sign without ever sharing custody of any of the key material. So it's pretty brilliant. And so we're just one of the early projects to take advantage of this. I know teams that are working on Lightning. This actually does a ton for Lightning. And then another one that's really interesting is the Kaizen team. If anyone wants to, our code's not open source yet, but if anyone wants to see this in action, Kaizen has a great Rust library called multi-party ECDSA. So anyway, it's sort of beautiful. You get your friends together, you do distributed key generation, you each have a key share. Whenever you want, you can agree to sign things. On the Bitcoin chain, it looks just like any other transaction.
So one of the concerns I saw in the white paper is that there's no attribution here, right? So if there's multiple signers, everyone is responsible. You know,
Yeah.
I think if there's 15 people signing,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and if you know a subset of those
Sure.
engages in fraud, then
Yeah.
everybody's responsible.
Yes. So there's like briefing opportunity.
Do you want to just talk through that and maybe
Yeah.
just when you think that might be addressed? I think there's some reference to future.
Yeah,
work.
so in V1, it's really important to take away from this that we're using what I'm calling a multi-federation. So if this were just one federation for the whole thing, the lack of attributability, I don't actually know if that's a real word, but I'm going to stick with it. It's unacceptable, right? Because you have these honest participants who are constantly getting hammered by a dishonest participant. But in our case, because the whole market cap is split, each Bitcoin has a different disjoint set of participants. You have this issue where maybe one person is acting out on one of these little mini federations, but across the whole thing, you really don't care. It's a very expensive thing for them to do. And once they get slashed, they won't have the capital to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. So there's not really an opportunity to, if this were like liquid style, but with threshold ECDSA, this would not be an acceptable solution. So we do plan, we're actually, we've reached out to a couple people who are, we have an advisor who's deep in MPC, and then we've reached out to Rosario and some other folks. We would love to work on an attributable threshold scheme to make this sort of even stronger beyond economic security and actually get cryptographic security there as well. But it's certainly not a blocker to ship the product.
Yeah, no, I think it's nice that if you're a signer, at least your risk is split across.
Of course,
Potentially, if you have a large bond and you're split across so many groups,
and that's
that if
why
one
we're
or
not
two
doing 100 Bitcoin, federations. Sure. It's like just limit your risk.
Yes. Okay. No, that's pretty cool. I guess there's two more questions. Sure. One is just around the go-to-market. Like, what's the next step for you guys? How do you take this out?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the big one is shipping it. Right. Sure. So, like, I mean, I can talk about all these great use cases and everything else, but the reason we put this spec out is to hear what people think. And so we've done that. And what did we hear? We heard some spectrum between this is the best thing ever to have in open finance and it's on Ethereum, you scammers. Well, actually, they've been pretty nice about using the S word, but definitely like the price oracle has raised some questions. And so I think for us, it's like, okay, what is the minimum level of kind of decentralization and trustlessness for us to ship? So I think we're going to replace the price oracle. We have a couple improvements to make in the SPV proofs. The Suma team has come up with something sort of even better and more efficient that we're quite pleased with. Cool. So we'll be switching to that. And then after that, one of the things that I've talked about is maybe doing a phased release where we start with 10 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin, 1,000 Bitcoin for the market cap, rather for the supply side, just because I don't want to find out the hard way. And it's much easier when you incentivize that early testing, like put some money on the line and see if folks are going to break it. And then the other stuff, I mean, let's see what Maker thinks. Let's see what Compound thinks. Yeah. I think that this is going to be by far the strongest Bitcoin solution on Ethereum come launch. And I should also say we expect this is going to be landing definitely on testnet, likely on mainnet before the end of the year.
Okay, tattoo if you're on. That's the Cosmos thing, right?
I prefer eating articles of clothing usually.
Sure. Facial tattoos? Did you go that far?
God, I think I'd have to talk to my wife before I commit to anything too ridiculous. But
But end of the year.
Yeah. No, I feel. How about this? I think. Once this oracle's fixed, we'll be opening it up to start getting kind of the next level of feedback on the code. So
okay, great. So just the last question then is just like, so what are the biggest challenges? We talked about oracles. Sure. Is there anything else that you feel you're still wrestling with? Like,
I think there are a couple that are interesting. So I think one of them is, I don't want to call it's not marketing, but it's just like understanding, right? So I sort of have more experience with Bitcoin than I do with Ethereum. And feel like I've got my foot in both camps a little bit. But there aren't many people like that. A lot of folks left Bitcoin for Ethereum or refused to touch Ethereum because of their belief in Bitcoin. And so I think, what I love about this project is we're sort of poking that sore spot. Like, you guys need to look at each other. You can't, we're not talking about a flippening. We're just talking about admitting you both exist and being okay with that. So I think one of them is understanding. How can I talk to the most hardcore Bitcoin fanatic and there are Ethereum maximalists, I have met them, and get them to kind of agree that this is an interesting and worthwhile project. So I think that's been one. And then I think, actually, I'm going to stick with that. That's pretty huge. So can we not just be a technological bridge, but maybe also a bit of a social bridge?
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much. It was really great to talk to you. A really exciting project, like I said, creating like amazing kind of waves of enthusiasm in the last couple of weeks. So long may it continue, and we look forward to the launch later this year.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Chorus One podcast. Visit chorus.one for more information about our work. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to stay tuned on new episodes airing every Monday.